We've mentioned WandaVision. We should mention another Marvel TV show that just ended a week and change ago. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, then ending in the name Captain America and the Winter Soldier, which starred Anthony Mackie and Sebastian Stan as both Falcon / Captain America and the Winter Soldier, respectively. It was an okay series. It was very much more standard Marvel fare. They had some pretty cool things in it. Zemo was pretty awesome. The Wakandans were pretty awesome. Dora Milaje was pretty awesome. But the main catch was the whole struggle for Sam to finally become Captain America, to finally kind of take on that mantle, to hold up the shield, even after spending time with a man who had at one point or another been Captain America and then was tested on for 30 years, that sort of stuff. It's all things that you find in canon within the comic books. And so I remember watching it on television myself and being, kind of happy, like they're living out what's happened in the comic books. Sam Wilson is now Captain America. And then I started reading some articles, which is what happens with all of us. You have an idea, you read articles, your mind changes all rapidly. But in the article from theringer.com, one of my favorite websites that's not grantland.com, talked about how Sam Wilson going from Falcon to Captain America was an actual demotion, that he actually hurt himself and hurt his legacy by taking on that mantle, because in not so many words, he was putting on the cloakness of acceptance by white America rather than carrying on his own self as Falcon. While he might have been a little whack, he might not have had as many powers, he was still himself for his own culture. And in becoming Captain America, while to the world it looked like a promotion, it was actually demotion for him in his culture. So we are going to talk a little bit about Blackton America and the idea of representation. Yes, Adam, I used the title that you gave it. It's worth it. Blackton America.
That was supposed to be a working internal title.
It's out there now.
Whatever.
Out there now.
We're going.
And the conversation is this, gentlemen. All of us at one point or another have worked in white spaces. The majority of us have worked in the white evangelical church space. And all of us have one point or another have been the only person of color in a room of white people. We've all kind of had that sort of moment. And there's always this sort of toggle. Like, how much do you remain yourself to your culture, and how much do you remove and take on so you're able to be accepted into a certain space, to be able to have your voice heard. And so conversation is not necessarily about Falcon and Winter Soldier and the show. It's a springboard to a conversation about what does it mean to representation. We know that representation is important, but at what cost? So gentlemen, I pose that question to you before we go to the main event. Some thoughts that we've been talking about a little bit. Let's go.
Yeah. There's a lot to unpack, especially within the show, the Winter Soldier and the Falcon, because Sam is trying to think about the future, not just right now. So, and I know it's going to correlate to what your question was, Chase. Don't worry. So he's saying if I stop being the Falcon and do this can help future people's understanding of what's possible, versus if he were to stay in this previous character as the Falcon, it would be somewhat of a limit. I think in retrospect, like if you're being honest with yourself, it would be a limit. It would never be as big of a character down the road. So it's the same thing that we're talking about, like when we've worked in white evangelical spaces in that context. Meaning where sometimes you have to take some sacrifices so that you can still remain in the room. And that's the only way that you could equivocate change and be an advocate for change. The question is also like, how far are you willing to go for that? Because the fact that you're in the room also means that you have to bring your uniqueness. And we've also had an episode about this called Code Switching. Shout outs to our previous episodes. Go check it out, where we talk about how we behave differently in different rooms. Now, this is at a higher stake, I believe, when you're in a professional setting and you're speaking now as a contributor in your workplace or a meeting or organization, and it requires you to be true to yourself, But at the same time, I think you also always have to be thinking, what will the next generation be allowed to do? We're living in a very quickly moving, progressive world. And I think there's a lot of weight, and it's unfair, but a lot of times, I've mentioned this all last year in our previous first season, the Black people often have to be the adults in the room, have to take on that extra weight of dealing with our uniqueness, our own characteristics, our own opinions and viewpoints, while still trying to make other people feel comfortable and not threatened by us. So that's it for now.
Yeah, I would say that one thing I truly believe is that potential is incredibly overrated. And I think when you're seeing a comic book come to life, and as exciting as it is, to realize the themes of like decades ago that Stan Lee and his writers were trying to work towards, and seeing them still being played out in real time, I think we get a couple things conflated. Like, there is what's happening in the world as a reality, and then this platform and this company get to produce art to inspire us to a better tomorrow, a more ideal kind of space. But again, to that idea of like potential is overrated, I think by Steve Rogers knowing who Sam was in the comic book, in the universe, to be able to say, I know he has the capacity, I know he has the potential to be what I have been and what I have not yet been able to be. Right? He is going to be what I could never become, and handing him that shield. I think you get to see that tension played out throughout the series, where he's like, okay, you see the potential in me and you've bestowed this honor on me, but I didn't even ask for it. I didn't want it. And so in that case of like potential is overrated, until somebody actually owns and says, I want the responsibility, I want to become the thing that is in me, that is possible for me to achieve and to get to and to platform. I think that's real. And I think that everybody in this chat has felt that. I think in all parts of our world, color aside, I think there are things that are handed to us that we actually have to own. And so, no, I don't think it was a demotion. I actually think if he would have just wore the stars and the stripes and continued because Steve said so, then yes, he would have been a sellout. He wouldn't have been true to who his character was. But to see how he was able to dig deep, really wrestle within, and marry those two things. I am the Falcon, but I am also the guy who's going to take this conversation and this narrative, this justice, and make room for all of the people that he makes room for in the cinematic universe. I think that he upgraded. It's my thought.
Yeah, it's tough because Cal, I love the way that you broke that down, and you're sitting within the story with the writers there. But to take a step back from that, I think we have to understand that this was first and foremost a business decision before a story decision in terms of a renewal of Chris Evans' contract, and because he's going to be the Human Torch when Fantastic Four comes out. But
flame on.
Just fierce. No, but for real though, in terms of I think the writers were handed a situation in terms of a non-renewable contract with Chris Evans, or at least maybe a termination of contract with Chris Evans. And so so now they're forced with, how do we continue the story of Captain America, which is a foundational point of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You don't get the universe without Captain America, the first Avenger, right? Mm-hmm. And so how do we continue this? And then wrestling with the very real tensions that Calvin so eloquently, put with the real tensions of what's going on. And so I think that this was a business decision that was weaved into a piece of art, and it brings up so many questions as to is Sam really Captain America, or is he that working title that we coined Blacked in America and stuff? Is he counterfeit, right? And it's stuff that, like, I think that this is actually opportunity for us to embrace, to actually see something that we've known and we've loved, and it's that we've known and we've that we've known and we've loved, but we're seeing it morph and change, and to actually be okay with that. That's actually the world that we aspire to, is that, like, something can start out as this and it's changing, and we're okay because we are flexible enough to embrace that change. So I don't know. Is it a demotion? It is what we make it. You know what I mean? Like, are we going to look at Sam and say, Yeah, he's demoted, or I don't think it is.
Yeah, I kind of see it in kind of both retrospects in terms of, would have been nice for them to focus on the Falcon and to build that brand as one of the first black characters in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. At the same time, when you're reading this article and they're saying, okay, he's taking a demotion, well, then you got to look at everything else. And you got to say, okay, if a black man is then to take on, first of all, be the first prime minister or the first president, is that a demotion? Because we're all striving to be at those points. So if you're going to take everything that this article says, then we should never strive for those things. We should never strive, because we would just be filling up white spaces. But those aren't white spaces. Those are all spaces that everyone could strive to be. At the same time, I think of him not necessarily as Captain America. I think of him as, Captain Falcon, because he still has everything that the Falcon has. And it's almost like a morphing of the two and the transition from one to another by still keeping the two together. And so, that's the kind of the challenge we have when we go into these spaces, is being who we are, yet being able to communicate in the way that they're listening so that we can better change and make change in the spheres of influence that we are in.
This is interesting. I agree with Andrew, and I look at it and I think back to, I look at like the church space, and how we want more black lead pastors, and how are we going to get how are we going to get there? And it might take a white person, a Caucasian brother or sister, saying, hey, look, I'm vouching for this person is going to be the next one, this black person, black man, black woman, they are fit to lead, I'm handing the torch to them and allowing them, because I see something in that person. And so I think that in the same way, like Captain America sees something, like Calvin says, he sees something in Sam, and so I think, like, if we look at it that way, we're seeing that we're seeing that someone's being elevated, and a white person is saying, listen, this is the one, trust him, he's going to take us further than where we were before. So I think it's pretty cool that Marvel decided to do this, and hopefully they do it right. Hopefully they allow that character to be a bit different than Steve Rogers, but we shall see.
A couple of quick hits from the chat here. Zach Baker writes this. I'll hear the house on this one, because I was on Steve Rogers gave it to him and thought that was legit, but I might be a white male. So apparently Zach doesn't know whether he's a white male or not. Zach, you are. And I wanted to hear where y'all at.
Surprise! Zach, do you put bread in the fridge or do you leave it on the counter?
Listen, leave it alone. Marie Crooks says this. All I can say is heavy is the head that wears the crown. Brandon Wells says this. If Sam Wilson decided to remain as the Falcon, would he have been making the same decision as Isaiah Bradley? If you know the show, Isaiah Bradley was willing to say no respectable black man would want to be Captain America. If you remember that from the episode. Brian Hempson said this. We also see how another white male takes on the mantle and greatly taints the legacy.
Hey, thanks for watching one of our House of Common show clips. To get more of this conversation on either YouTube or on podcast, click the link in the description below or at the end of this video. Remember that we are on live on YouTube at 10 o'clock every single Tuesday, and we drop a podcast every single Friday. Make sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and we will see you again with some more clips. This has been the House of Common Show.